Hello everyone, welcome back to Momo's Reading Corner. As you could probably tell from the title of today's video, I'm going to be talking about my October TBR, which is just a list of books I want to read in October. There are 13 books in my October TBR, which is just a little bit ambitious, but I'm really excited to share these books with you. The genres in my TBR include horror and gothic horror, science fiction, fantasy, gothic fantasy, and philosophy. Let's get into it. So just to start with the actually spooky reads for October, we're going to begin with horror. And the first book on this list is The Whispering Muse by Laura Purcell. So this book is about a very talented actress who was employed by a theater company in London sometime in the past. This actress has forged a deal with some Greek mythological being and is, as a result, very captivating in her performances. It's almost as if she's possessed by the characters themselves. And the theater owner's wife becomes really suspicious and sends someone to spy on this actress. And this person actually begins to feel sorry for our lead actress because while her performances are incredibly captivating and just she really embodies those characters on stage, off stage, she's miserable. And so, as the spy starts to learn more and more about this person, she wants to befriend the actress. And as a result, strange things start to happen in the theater company, which kind of begins to reveal some of the secrets behind the actress's talent. I was immediately intrigued when I saw that this book was going to be gothic horror and it involves an actress in a theater company in London. This already sounds extremely mysterious, and generally speaking, I've heard really good things about this book, so I'm really excited for this to be the first book to read on my list. The next book on my list is Fyneshade, not sure how to say it, by Kate Griffin. And this is also historical fiction and gothic horror. The book follows a woman named Martha who, after her grandmother's funeral, is sent to be governess at Fyneshade. Unfortunately, the owner is perpetually absent and his son is forbidden from entering the premises because he is dangerous, essentially. And so Martha, who is a very smart individual and has her own dark secrets bestowed to her by her grandmother, is meant to protect herself from all of the secrets that reside at Fyneshade. I find this a very interesting, or rather intriguing, read for me to include in my October TBR because, once again, it is a gothic horror and it's also historical fiction, which is super fun. And I also think that just finding secrets in a manner that you're not familiar with, and also there's a dangerous individual who you may or may not be drawn to for some reason, I find those dynamics to be very interesting, and I'm eager to see how things play out in this story. The next book on my list is a book called Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This is a horror and mystery thriller that's about a person named Maddie who lives with William on a mountain. And essentially, they've been living there a long time with no problems, supposedly, until she finds a mutilated body of a fox when she realizes there's something sinister in the woods that wasn't there before. And eventually, a group of 3 individuals arrive on the mountain to hunt down this creature. And that basically sets into motion a series of events that are horrifying. At least I'm guessing so from the way the synopsis is written. I'm immediately intrigued by this because the synopsis is very vague as to exactly what is going on. All we know is that there is a creature in the woods that wasn't there before, there's a couple who may or may not be having problems on the mountain, and there are 3 other individuals who arrive on the mountain for the purpose of hunting down this creature. And so we've got multiple different components going on, in addition to the fact that we have literally no idea what the creature is, how it got there. There is just something weird about William that we're not being told in the synopsis, and I would like to find out those mysteries. And so I'm very excited to include this book on my TBR and eventually read it. The next book on my list is called Magdalena by Sary. I'm actually not entirely sure what this book is about. All I know is it's about a woman named Dottie who kind of develops a motherly interest in a 15-year-old girl, but this causes a series of very strange events to happen. Now she's in the public eye, but she's able to write about her experience. I've seen people describe this book as being very creepy, very eerie, and I don't really know much else about the book other than this sounds very interesting. I'm all for a creepy, eerie book in October, and I'm glad this is on my list. The next book is one that I'm really excited about, actually. It's called Our Hideous Progeny by C.E. McGill, and this is a gothic horror as well. The book is a twist on Frankenstein, which I'm sure many of us are familiar with. It follows the great niece of Victor Frankenstein, Mary Sutherland, and her husband Henry, who are incredibly smart and very ambitious medical professionals, scientists, and they basically seek to create life to become renowned in the scientific community. They do succeed, they create a creature, and Mary, instead of becoming more ambitious with regards to expanding upon research of creating new life, instead comes to love the creature. To me, this is a very interesting take on a very familiar story, and I'm super excited to see what kinds of questions the author delves into with the discussion of the creation of this creature and loving this creature and science and all of the other questions that were grappled with by Mary Shelley. So yeah, overall, I think this would be an interesting read. Next is The Outsider by Stephen King. I've read a few other Stephen King books, and so this will maybe be my fourth Stephen King book that I've read if I get to finish it. And I'm not really sure what this is about other than there's a guy wearing other people's faces and he's doing horrific things. And so I'm excited to see exactly what this book is about and if it scares me as much as Pet Sematary did, because Pet Sematary, though I should clarify, it wasn't scary, but it was horrifying. It was definitely disturbing. And so I'd like to see if this book was anything like that. To close out the horror genre, we finally have Starling House by Alix E. Harrow, which is supposed to be coming out in October. From what I know about this book, it's supposed to be another haunted house story, which I always love. I think that generally, if they're well executed, they're super interesting and fun to read. I'm really excited to see if this book does it for me in terms of haunted house story. The only book that I have in the science fiction section is actually a science fantasy. It is called The Surviving Sky by Krithika H. I'm really excited to read this book because it's actually the first Hindu-inspired science fiction or science fantasy I've ever read. And essentially, it is about a group of refugees. Humanity at this point is sequestered into plant-made floating civilizations above a jungle planet. And the main couple, the main characters in this story, one of them is an architect who is actually able to manipulate plants and therefore create these plant civilizations. So they're really highly revered, they're highly respected because they're essentially what keeps humanity afloat in this situation. And his wife is not someone who can control plants. And so there's kind of like a disconnect between them, and they're having a difficult marriage until the architect is accused of doing forbidden things with his magic. And so it's up to the both of them to clear his name while at the same time unveil some of the secrets, I guess, behind their powers or why humanity is stuck on these civilizations or whatever other secrets there happen to be. The synopsis keeps it very vague. But I'm very intrigued by the premise of this. I think the ability to manipulate plants and that being the way that humanity continues to survive is very interesting. And I also really like the idea of there already being an established romantic relationship, and it's a matter of them working to maintain that relationship, to work through any problems. And probably the worst problem that could ever happen, which is you're being accused of doing literally the worst thing possible with your magic, and now it's up to the both of you to clear your name. Moving on to Gothic fantasy, the first book we have is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This is a YA Gothic romance, which isn't usually my cup of tea, but I'm compelled a little bit by the synopsis, which is basically about this avid reader who's been haunted by visions of a fairy king for a very long time. She's feeling conflicted about these visions, basically because they followed her throughout her entire life. Eventually, she enters into a contest that is being held by the family of her favorite author because her favorite author has passed. And the contest is essentially to decorate their manor. And so she goes to this manor basically to learn more about her favorite author and also actually participate in this contest. And it's a decrepit manor, but there's a lot of information in there. And she meets this other person in that contest who is actually trying to prove that her favorite author is a fraud. And so they're in this rival situation in which they disagree wholeheartedly about this core thing about whether or not this person was a good author. And somehow they get to working together and figure out things are not what they seem in this manner. There are lots of things about this synopsis that really draw me in. First of all, the avid reader aspect of the main character. Second, the rivals situation that we've got going on in this particular competition. And also the fact that these rivals end up working together to uncover a really big secret, a really big mystery about the manor. And all of those things draw me in, so I'm excited to be picking up this book. The next book is actually a second book in a series. It is called Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. It's the second book in the Shepherd King series. The first book is called A Dark Window, and I actually unexpectedly thoroughly enjoyed it. It's a gothic fantasy with a dash of romance. I think the romance to plot ratio was perfect in this book. It was more like a 70-30% ratio, and that is exactly what I want out of when there's romance included in certain stories. But anyways, I think that the magic system in this world is super interesting. I really liked the prose in the first book, totally loved the main character. And so I'm definitely going to be picking up the second book here, Two Twisted Crowns, to see what happens next and just to continue reading this really good prose that I thoroughly enjoyed in the first book. Moving on to the fantasy section, the first book that we have is Swordcatcher by Cassandra Clare. I don't know anything about this book. I just know who Cassandra Clare is. I, truth be told, did not really enjoy the Shadowhunter series very much at all when I read it when I was much younger. But I do want to see what she does with this particular series because it is supposed to be taking place in a completely different universe, completely new storyline with new characters. And so I am pretty interested to see what happens. And from what I was able to gather from the synopsis, which I read a while back and can barely remember, basically there's going to be some magic involved. There's a king, so royalties involved. And there's a criminal underworld with corruption and all sorts of bad things that the main characters will have to find out about and eventually fight. All these things are interesting to me, and so I would like to see how this book ends up being. Next in the fantasy category is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. Even after reading the synopsis, I'm still not sure what exactly this book is about, other than there is a person trapped in the library, and eventually that person will cross paths with a girl who is trapped in a dust settlement, who is constantly being stalked by nightmares, and somehow that's going to result in something. I'm not sure what else is there to this book, but I think that's one of the things that draws me in. I'm very intrigued by the idea of someone being trapped in a library for forever. The fact that this book is the first of 3 books in the Library Trilogy series is also what's interesting to me. I would like to see what this book is about, and so that's why I've included it on my list. Closing off with the last category, which is philosophy, I have one book which I got at a reuse store, which called out to me essentially, but it's a textbook called Philosophy of the Mind. It's not very large, or not as large as most textbooks would be in my imagination, but it is an introduction to philosophy of the mind. And having read a few pages, maybe that's cheating or whatever, but having read a few pages, I am already pretty interested in some of the concepts that are going to be discussed in this book. And so I'm looking forward to broadening my horizons in this area of philosophy. If you made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for your time. I hope this was entertaining, and I hope you found some good additions to your own October TBR. I'm really excited to meet back with you at the end of October to discuss what I thought about these books and whether or not I would actually recommend them. Next week, I'm planning on posting a video about all of the books that I read in September and my thoughts and reviews about them. Until then, see you next time.